Arrays are a very useful data type, a very useful kind of value for storing related data that can be expressed as a list of data. Basically, just as we had lists in HTML, you could say, for outputting related list data. Sometimes we also have other kinds of related data, which is not just a list, but which is related but needs more context. So which is not just a list of equal values, these are all hobbies after all, but instead multiple connected values that describe different things. Sounds very abstract? Let's consider a passport or an ID. This here, for example, is the German ID, but you have something like this for every country in the world, I would assume. And the interesting thing here is that this, of course, describes related data in the end, but we have labels that tell us which piece of data describes which trait of this person. So, for example, we have a label for the name, and then we have the value, the actual name of this person. The last name and the first name, we have the date of birth, and so on. And we always have these labels and then the values for these labels. And overall, of course, we can clearly say that this is related data. All these different pieces of data describe one person. But it's not a list of data, because it's not the same kind of data. We have names, dates, countries, cities, different kinds of data on there. So it's not the same as a list of hobbies. And to describe such kind of data as well in JavaScript, we have another important data type, another important value we can create. And that would be objects. Let's say our user who visits this website has a job. But a job is not just a string where we say developer, for example. But instead, the job could be a combination of different values where we have the name of the company, the place where he or she works, and so on. And for that, we could create such an object. We do that with curly braces after this equal sign here. So opening and closing curly brace. And between those curly braces, we now put the different properties of this object, the different labels and their values that make up this overall object. And we call these label value combinations properties in the context of such an object in JavaScript. And these labels are up to us. And we could say that a job is described by a title and then maybe the place where this job is being done. And therefore we could add two labels here, a title label and then separated by a comma, our place label. And again, these labels are up to you. You can use any labels you want. Now the labels on their own are not that useful though. If we have a look at our passport again, we did not just have the labels there, but also values for those labels. And values are now assigned not with an equal sign, but by a colon after our labels. And then after that colon, before you have that comma, and then the next label, you have the value for that label. And values for labels inside of an object can again be all those values you already learned about. Strings, numbers, arrays, even other objects, so-called nested objects. But that's something we'll explore later. So here our title could be a string, and that could be developer, for example. And then place also needs a value, so we add a colon, and then again a value that makes sense here. So that could again be a string, and it's maybe New York. Maybe a job also has a salary, and that could be a number. Let's say 50,000 US dollars per year or anything like that. That could be a job, a rich object where multiple pieces of data are grouped together. Now we could also use three individual variables. We could create a variable job title that stores developer, and create another variable, job place, that stores New York, and create yet another variable, job salary, that stores the 50,000. We could use these three variables instead of this job object. We could work with those variables in our subsequent code as well. But if we use three individual variables instead of one object, then we as a developer always have to kind of keep in mind that these three variables are logically related. And that might be easy to do, especially in a simple script like this, but it's even easier if you group them together explicitly by creating such an object, just as we created an array for multiple connected list items instead of working with multiple variables. And that's why here I will not create three individual variables, but instead one object that has these different properties. By the way, you can of course think about these properties as variables that are scoped, that belong to one object. You don't have the let keyword here though, you just directly have the label name and then the value, and you assign that with a colon instead of an equal sign. But other than that, it's basically like variables that are closed into that object, so to say.